Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. I am your host, Adam Portress, and I'm joined by sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's my pleasure to be here.
And he's called Snake Eyes for other reasons, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and I just want to say Snake Eyes doesn't need lips.
No, he does not. And we don't need this, but yet our people over at patreon.com/HB have voted this month, as they do every month, and decided that we will watch G.I. Joe, Rise of the Cobra. And listen, I love these people. They're so nice to help support us. They get the pre-show, post-show, and, of course, the Dinger Zone. This week we talk our favorite comedy scenes and a little bit of comic book movie and TV show news and that kind of stuff. But this week, as much as I love them, I also kind of hate them a little bit because Rise of the Cobra. Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
And in all fairness sake, I think at least a few people thought they might have been voting for G.I. Joe, the movie, the animated thing that was broke up and shown over 2 weeks on broadcast television after the Transformers movie didn't do so well at the box office.
Maybe this could have been a better choice. We don't know. But we'll find out. We'll find out all that kind of good stuff.
Is that the movie you're talking about? Is that Serpentor?
It might be. I don't know. Because it was never really released as a movie in real time. Later, it was packaged as a movie for home video release. But when I saw the Serpentor, I thought I was just watching the first episode of a new season, you know?
It's back when, like, the VHS tapes, you know, if you were lucky for something like that, you'd pay like $40. Anyways, so we'll be getting to all that kind of good stuff. And like I said, if you want to be a part of that crew that votes on what we watch for and has all the extra special content and stuff, head on down to patreon.com/Hero Movie Podcast, or just click the links in the show notes, as they're always there. You can do all the things, find all the places that we are. They're there in the notes. That's why they're there, for fun and for you. Thank you. All right, boys, let's get into it. Here is a trailer for G.I. Joe, Rise of the Cobra.
We have never faced a threat like this. A team is being assembled. They're the best operatives in the world. When all else fails, we don't. I want in.
Standing in front of you, a Delta 6 accelerator suit.
What's it accelerate?
You.
General Hawk. Mission is a go.
Here they come.
Go, go, go!
We're running out of time. Eject!
Alrighty, that was the trailer for G.I. Joe, Rise of the Cobra. Well, you won't know what time it is.
It's time for Bruce's Comic Book Connection.
Bruce, a lot of people may not think that G.I. Joe has a comic book connection, but you'll say otherwise, right?
Oh, yes, because on June 7th, 1949, in the small East Coast town of New York City, a child was born. And like 99.9% of folks living in America in the 20th century, this child could trace his roots back to the old country. And with the last name that is common in both Scandinavia and Syria, it might be worth pointing out that this child's family tree goes back to Japan. But by his own words, this child does not like to be identified as a Japanese American. He makes it clear that he is American. And I think you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone who would call Larry Hama anything other than a real American, or as I prefer, a real American hero. Now, Larry Hama's grandparents came to America from Japan in the first decade of the 20th century and started a chain of events that would lead to Larry living a life that was oh so far from ordinary. Mr. Hama was a man of action right from the start. As a child, he studied judo and archery in addition to, and please let me pause so everyone listening can feel the waves of admiration emanating from me when I tell you this next part. He also studied sword fighting. That's every boy's dream, to study sword fighting. Oh, yeah. And he didn't just study any sword fighting. He studied Japanese sword fighting. That's the kind of sword fighting that samurai and ninja do. And to think, all my mom let me do was take a week of tennis lessons during the summer between 5th and 6th grade. I was awful at tennis. And now all my sword fighting skills are self-taught. If my dearly departed mother wasn't the very definition of a saint, I'd be bitter about that. But she did kind of turn a blind eye to the whole machete thing, so I'd say we're even. Now, he was equal parts artist and warrior, because at the tender age of 16, he sold his first comics to Castle of Frankenstein. After graduating high school, Larry Hama got a job drawing shoes for catalogs, because I guess there was a time when it was cheaper to hire a teenager to draw pictures of shoes than it was to take an actual photograph. Of course, a guy with totally wicked sword fighting skills can't spend his whole life drawing mail order penny loafers, so when duty called, he answered. Larry Hama served in the U.S. Army from 1969 to 1971. And in case people don't know what was going on in the world during those years, it was full-on Vietnam War era. Larry Hama could have maybe been like many of the comic book artists who served during World War II. He could have drawn comics either for propaganda or maybe to boost morale. But that is not the way of the Hama. Larry Hama was in the 18th Engineer Brigade, and he went to Vietnam, where he became an explosive ordnance expert. After he got back from Nam, he channeled everything he had learned as a soldier into his next creative endeavor. He was an assistant artist on Sally Forth. And when I first read that, I thought he worked for the lame Sally Forth I read in the papers as a kid, but he worked on the cool Sally Forth, who Wikipedia describes as, and I quote, a sexy action-adventure character. He moved from Sally to a job penciling a few issues of Iron Fist in 1974, then made the natural transition all comic book pencilers make. He was on a 1976 episode of MASH. Yes, Larry Hama became an actor and played the role of North Korean on MASH. But that wasn't the last television for Larry Hama. He was also on Saturday Night Live in a sketch spoofing Apocalypse Now. I don't know what his role was, but I suspect it was Asian Dude. Now, after paying the bills with his acting prowess for about a year, Hama said, I always basically saw myself as an artist, not as anything else. So how lucky we are, the consumers of comics, cartoons, and movies, because after working as the editor of the Welcome Back Kotter comic for DC, he went to Marvel, and that's when he created G.I. Joe. And when I say Larry Hama created G.I. Joe, I mean it. Sure, Hasbro made the toy line, but that's all they made. It was Larry Hama who came up with everything we know about the characters, what it is that actually makes those plastic posable figures come to life in the minds of children and those of us who are still children at heart. Hama got the gig writing G.I. Joe because everyone else at Marvel turned it down, and Big Jim Shooter came to Hama as a last resort. This was perfect from Hama's perspective because he was trying to pitch a more military-themed S.H.I.E.L.D. spinoff, and he could simply apply those ideas to the licensed comic. Hama included military terms and strategies, Eastern philosophy, martial arts, and historical references from his own background into those G.I. Joe comic stories, and people loved it. He didn't just write the comics, though. He also wrote those file cards that came on the back of all the G.I. Joe toys. Something Marvel appreciated was the female following G.I. Joe comics had, with some legitimate butt-kicking female characters, one of whom, Scarlet, is rumored to be based on Larry Hama's own wife. Here's what Hama said about the female readers. Quote, most of the girls that write in with letters to the comic say that the reason they like the comic is that the women characters are simply part of the team. They're not treated as any different from the other team members. They don't go around with their palms nailed to their foreheads. They're competent, straightforward, and they go ahead and get the job done. They also participate emotionally. They have their likes and dislikes. They're not ill-treated, and they're not running around being worrywarts, end quote. As if creating the names, personalities, and stories for G.I. Joe wasn't enough, there's more. In 1987, Hasbro released the Tunnel Rat action figure. And Tunnel Rat, he just happens to be an explosive ordnance specialist. And also, if you look closely at Tunnel Rat, you'll notice that he bears a striking resemblance to a guy from that one episode of MASH. Yep, that's right, ladies and gentlefolk. Larry Hama actually became a G.I. Joe. So if there was ever any doubt into who the heart and soul of everything G.I. Joe in every aspect was, now you know. And as Larry Hama probably never said, knowing is half the battle.
It's interesting that you say that. Well, first and foremost, like this is why we have Bruce do this. I learned so much. I didn't know 98% of all that. That's pretty wild. That's really cool stuff. Something I found out about myself recently, just talking about putting yourself in art and everything. I don't know what came about, but like I looked at myself in the mirror like not too awful long ago and realized, oh, the faces I've been drawing in just all of my extracurricular, kind of comic book-esque drawing throughout pretty much my entire life have all kind of been me. From like lines on the forehead to like where how little bits of the eyebrows and all that kind of stuff. I'm just going, oh, I've clearly just been drawing myself. I don't know why it took me so long to realize that like a lot of the facial features that I draw in characters are myself.
Is that why all of your characters are so handsome?
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's like an idealized version of me. It's like, what if I was like really cool looking and like had an even better jaw?
But something about those Muppet Babies pictures you did was unsettling. Now I know what it was.
Hey, listen, man, what Gonzo does. It ain't none of your business. I'll tell you that right here, right now.
They're always starving.
What was the relationship between you guys and G.I. Joes back in the day? Because for me, it was always like there always seemed to be like two camps. You're either a G.I. Joe kid or a Transformers kid. You can like both for sure, but you ended up liking one more than the other. And I think I ended up more on Transformers sides, even though we didn't have enough money for toys for either of those, to be honest.
I was a G.I. Joe guy, like no question about it. You always loved both. They came on one right after the other when you got home from school. But I was always a G.I. Joe guy because it was mid-'80s, Reagan era, a lot of jingoism, center of the Cold War. The Army guys were cool to me. And the toys were significantly cheaper if you were going to buy the toys or ask for the toys.
Yeah. If you were to ask me this question without any forethought, if I was to answer without any forethought, I would tell you that I was more of a Transformers kid. However, I'm remembering that when I had gotten caught doing something awful as a child, and my mother had taken a bunch of my toys away, and mostly what she took away were G.I. Joes. And so I think I honestly think I was probably more of a G.I. Joe kid.
Yeah.
Well, that's because you prefer GoBots.
I'm a GoBots man, doggone it.
If we're talking Psykill, yeah, I'm all about Psykill.
I think like most everybody, I was more cartoon than comics, but I think I was more into the comics than my peers were at the time. Because if I saw G.I. Joe on a spinner rack and I had let's see, what's the cover? I actually have G.I. Joe #1 here. Let me look. $1.50. So if I could get my hands on $1.50, I was buying a copy of Hama's G.I. Joe 2. And the stories were very different in that the comics actually fleshed out who the characters were, and you learned things about their background. And even though I watched way, way more of the cartoon, if you're asking me like, what do I consider an accurate depiction of a character? I'm going to be holding it up against that comic book standard where people could be developed.
What's the year on that? What'd you say, $1.50?
Yeah, it's 80s.
I think it's 83.
That's high.
All I know is it was June. I've got it right here in my hand. Don't worry, it's well protected. I'm not getting
that's an expensive comic at that time, I would say.
Yeah, I think a lot of them were 75 cents, but probably because, they had to pay Hasbro half of the take on
it. So we're going to charge you kids double. Hope you don't mind. Yeah. Your parents won't.
Yeah, I remember it being more expensive than a regular comic book.
Probably no nicer either. It's not like an Image comic where you're paying $3, but at least it's like, better than the newspaper print.
Just to clarify, I have Secret Wars #1 over here from a couple years later, and it's a 75-cent comic. So it was a double price comic.
That's an expensive deal right there. I'm like, man, if the comics were that much back then, my dad would have quit way earlier than he did. Because when it got to like the $1.50, almost $2 range, he was just like, this is too expensive. And then picked up a wild and crazy DVD habit that hasn't ended to this day. So who's to say?
and, it was always a difficult choice. Do I want to get Spider-Man and X-Men, or do I want to get one comic that's G.I. Joe?
Wow. I know which way I'm going. It ain't G.I. Joe. I'll tell you that one right now. So this is a movie from, what is the year? 2009. Here's the IMDb plot line. An elite military unit comprised of special operatives known as G.I. Joe operating out of the pit takes on an evil organization led by a notorious arms dealer. This is directed by Stephen Sommers, who most people would probably know from The Mummy. I think that was like probably the thing that shot him into the stratosphere for everybody. But he's a director, and I think we're going to talk a lot about him because he's the guy behind.
He was a director.
Is he not doing anything now?
No.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's still alive.
Okay.
That shows he's got an upcoming. He's got something in development right now, according to IMDb at least.
It's a
Well, I mean,
sandwich.
he's got all of that. He's got all of that mummy money. Like, and I don't mean that as a joke. I mean, he's even a producer on all of the Scorpion King stuff.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
He's fine.
Do you know, like, did he get a producer credit on the Tom Cruise Mummy remake? Because he
No.
feels like he might have been in one of those Michael Ouzland situations where he gets grandfathered in
No,
on everything.
he's not that entrenched in it. He's not like Walter Hill when it comes to the Aliens
man.
movies.
Yeah.
But if you have any of the characters from that original Mummy movie in your movie, he gets a producer credit because he also wrote it.
Now, the Mummy movies, boy, I remember. I mean, not that I remember. I've rewatched the Mummy many times, and not all that long ago. I love the Mummy. Still, like something that's missing in cinema options. Like, it's kind of got a little more campy feel, but it's still kind of getting that Indiana Jones vibe, just a touch, just a campier version of it. And I feel like there aren't really just like have fun, feel good throwback movies like that anymore, like the Mummy was.
It's true, but and it worked for the first Mummy. The other mummies are awful.
Yeah, but I don't
First
like the
one's great.
sequels. That's a problem too. There, it's like you can't leave money on the table when making money's your job, but it would have been a great one and done movie.
And we'll talk about it in this film as well, but I kind of want to go through like just some of his previous films leading up to this and The Mummy to give you this statement to say Stephen Sommers should have never made a movie outside of the 90s. So here's his he made a movie called Catch Me If You Can in 1989, which
Not that one.
Yeah, not the one that I was about to say is a great movie.
Not the fantastic Spielberg one, which was really, really good. But in 93, he did The Adventures of Huck Finn, which growing up, I enjoyed. I thought, because I was 11 years old at the time, Elijah Wood, really good. And Courtney Vance's Jim. Come on, Courtney Vance is amazing in everything he's in.
You know how much I love Courtney Vance.
That guy's amazing. Then he did The Jungle Book in 1994, which for what it was, pretty decent. You got Brandon Scott or Jason Scott Lee. I'm getting the Lees mixed up here.
Boy, of all the live action Jungle Book adaptations, that's the one that I have the least interest in.
Yeah. Deep Rising, it is what it is. But then you got The Mummy, man, which was really kind of the height of everything that he did because he just did Mummy sequel, Van Helsing, which is one of the worst pieces of garbage that there ever was.
So bad.
Another Mummy sequel. And then we're hitting 2009, and today, G.I. Joe, Rise of Cobra.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe it's not a bad thing that he's backed off.
Well, because 100%. I think that he should have really just kind of stopped there. 2013 is the last time that he
It's
made
like
a
you
movie.
drove a couple of buses and did an amazing job, then you crashed 4 or 5 in a row. Maybe just quit driving buses. There's nothing wrong with saying this isn't for me.
You've got to start driving boats now.
Stay away from driving altogether. Just sit home and count that sweet, sweet bus driver money from those 2 times. You did a good job.
So, G.I. Joe, Rise of Cobra, 2009. This is something that I kind of forgot about, that Channing Tatum was in this movie before Channing Tatum was a giant thing.
Yep.
And that's part of why he's in this movie, is because he wasn't a giant thing yet.
It's also before like Hollywood figured out that he's funny.
Yeah.
And it's also still a point when he didn't have enough juice to not make a movie he didn't want to make.
It's true.
Yeah, like he'd done like the Step Up stuff at that point, I believe, which were listen, I like them more than I should
Amazing.
like those dumb films, but they are fun. They're
I
stupid
absolutely
fun.
love a couple of them. It's like one of those you didn't really need the ninth entry or however.
No,
long
you
went.
don't. Honestly, you don't really need to go beyond 3. And 3 was kind of cool because it was 3D, and like you went to the theater, it was just like, oh, this is wildly unnecessary, but kind of cool.
And my Step Up experience is kind of like my Fast and Furious because I expected it to be so awful that when I found myself enjoying it, I thought it was like super great. And then when I go back and it's like, man, I want to watch that great movie again, I realize, no, it's just okay.
Yeah, keep the good thought in your mind and move on. Because even Channing Tatum at that within that genre of movies and everything, he tapped out of those pretty quick because all of a sudden people were like, oh, he's better than all of this. Yeah. But in 2009, nobody knew who he was, and I don't know what voice he's doing in this movie, but it is I do not like it.
Well, and he's famously gone on record many times saying he hates this movie. But it's not just that he hates it, it's that he hates that he didn't have any agency in it. Like basically he was told he had to make it if he wanted to not be sued.
Well,
it's kind of bitter that way.
Well, the thing is this too, is that not for nothing, but you just go, hey, the guy that did The Mummy, which was still at that point, not so far away that you were like, oh, he's lost it, but you are like, okay, well, he did that one. That was a big giant blockbuster. It really launched Brendan Fraser's career as a lead actor and everything at that point. I
was super excited for this movie in 2009.
Oh, you were?
I was super excited because I wanted something campy, something a little like The Mummy. I wanted all the Joes to be depicted and performed the way that Brendan Fraser does Sergeant Stone. Like I wanted this to be, I know you can't, it's got to have a little bit more to it than what the cartoon did, but I just wanted them to have fun with it. And, obviously that led to a lot of disappointment. And I'll say that I've watched this movie. This is the third time I've watched it, but I'll say it's the first time I've seen it because, man, I don't know that I had no reason to make myself stick with it when I was disappointed the first 2 times.
You know what, Bruce? I concur 100%. I think I'm in the exact same boat. I think I've seen this 3 times, and it's the first time that I've ever properly watched it.
And
which brings me to my question that I asked you guys off air. How would you fix this movie?
Well, one thing I would do to fix it is to actually have a G.I. Joe movie.
Right.
And let me elaborate. I don't say that because I'm just like the facetious know-it-all. This was a script.
Well, you are, but that's not why you're saying it.
Yeah. Well, this was a script that was written to, it's one of those situations where they had a script and they're like, you know what? We could just plug G.I. Joe into this. Mm-hmm. And I think you should start with like somebody who, doesn't necessarily hold G.I. Joe in reverence because it's not something that deserves to be held in reverence, but also like they're saying, why people are seeing this is because they're nostalgic for G.I. Joe. Nobody's coming to see this because we're adapting a beloved novel or something.
Right.
So how about we make the characters identifiable from the moment they step on screen? Let's do, and I'm not saying you make it a farce. You still have a little bit of the action, but Mummy, kind of the tone of The Mummy. That's part of why I was excited. The same director here, and The Mummy doesn't take itself too seriously. The action is fun, kind of like old school serial type action. Well, here they should take like afternoon cartoon type action, but have a little tighter story to it.
Yeah.
What about you, Adam? How would you fix it?
There's a lot of different ways, but I kind of piggybacking off of Bruce there. It's like they should have done something like what 21 Jump Street did. 21 Jump Street is a very funny movie, but it's also got some really good quality action in it. So if you can kind of reverse those and have it more towards the action and put in some decent quality kind of comedy in there, just to not, and I like Marlon Wayans for enough for what he's doing here. He's not horrible, but he's not great either. You got to remember, 2009, we're coming, he did such a fantastic performance in Requiem for a Dream. You're like, oh my God, this guy, if applied right in the right role and everything, he could be fantastic. And so part of me at that point when it was like, Marlon Wayans is in this, I'm like, ooh, that could be good. But he plays Marlon Wayans for the most part in this movie. But I think one of the biggest problems that this movie has, well, there's so many of them, and we'll go over all of them, I'm sure, is G.I. Joe is famous for having two really big, good villains in Destro and Cobra Commander. You know what they look like. They are super iconic, and we don't do anything with that until the very end, and even then, it's only 50%, and even that's kind of not very good. So
we're going to go ahead and I'm going to build on that because that's like my biggest complaint. If you're dealing with it, the cartoon didn't make you wait till the end of the first season for Cobra Commander to appear. Star Wars doesn't make you hold out until the end of the movie to see Anakin become Darth Vader. They tried that later and it didn't work. You need to have Cobra Commander on the scene, like from the get-go. Destro, you don't need to figure out, oh, this guy is Destro. I mean, he needs to look like Destro when you first see him. And then if you want to do some flashback, some connective tissue in the middle of the movie, that's fine. But like being a G.I. Joe fan, being a kind of kid that grew up having almost all the G1 and G2 figures, maybe a lot of the G3, I should be able to look and know who a character is before they say his name with a property like this.
Well, and
and you definitely don't start in 1641 France.
Yeah.
You know what? I could have even gone with that because that's just a little bit of an opening. That's the kind of weird thing that might have been in a cartoon episode where they start off in France and like, what's going on here? But then you cut away from that to Destro and his shiny modern metal mask talking to Cobra Commander. Also, Cobra Commander, I understand they didn't want to use the dark blue or dark purple clan hood that he had in the cartoons. I can understand that.
Use the mirror helmet then.
Yeah.
That's what they did in the sequel for this movie. They did a much better job, but don't make me not know. Like when I'm at the 3/4 point of this movie and there's still no Cobra Commander, I'm not at all interested in sticking around to see Cobra Commander. And then when I do stick around for whatever reason, I'm definitely disappointed in that mask.
Let me give you guys my pitch for a G.I. Joe movie.
Okay.
All right. So this is because they get everything about G.I. Joe is wrong in this first one. So you get special agents for special missions, for specific missions, right? Yeah. So you treat it almost like a Dirty Dozen / Suicide Squad, except for, like no one's life is on the line except for just the nature of the mission.
Right.
And so you end up disrupting these agents' lives. And so you get, like, we got to call in Flint and rock and roll for this one, and so like you got like rock and roll, like at a barbecue. He's like, oh, I got to go to work, like that kind of thing. They should not be living at a base. Yeah, like they should be living their lives, and they come in for these special missions. And so that way, you can bring in whomever you'd like, your Snake Eyes, your Grunt, whoever you want to bring in. You bring them in, and so, then who they're fighting against, because this version of Cobra, it makes absolutely no sense why you have these people who are like working for Destro at this point, right? Because Destro is just a money hungry dude who has an underwater base for some reason. You've got to make them almost like paramilitary zealots, right? So like they're just complete nut job, like gun toting crazies. And you bring it every time they have some new version of trying to take over the world, or, they've got a rock and roll band where they're trying to like control people's minds. Then you bring in the right people to do the job. And that's where the fun comes in, is you have somebody who's like, oh man, we're bringing, and by the way, how dare you make a G.I. Joe movie? You have two living human beings who are actually in G.I. Joe. There's no William the Refrigerator Perry. There's no Sergeant Slaughter. How dare you?
Yeah, that's bad. Also, man, the characters that you pick. G.I. Joe is so full of colorful fan favorites that they kind of drop the ball here, because no kid is going to sit around and when they say, okay, pick the 4 guys you want to see featured.
Right.
Duke is okay. You need either Duke or Flint to be that role, because they're in like every episode. I would even argue that that Hawk and Duke became kind of redundant because you don't see both of them in a lot of cartoons, but you need Duke or Flint. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But then nobody says their favorite G.I. Joe was Ripcord. You know, nobody prefers Heavy Duty to Roadblock. They're cousins in continuity. They're cousins. Why do you pick the lesser cousin? Like, it's not like they had to use these that I could tell. This is just what they chose. I don't even understand it. Nobody really liked Breaker. You know, like Breaker, maybe he serves a function in the plot, but you know who people like? They like Bazooka, the crazy guy with the bazooka that wore a red football jersey everywhere he went. Like, people love Shipwreck with his sailor hat and being outrageous. Brendan Fraser was originally supposed to be Gung Ho, and then they changed Gung Ho to Sergeant Stone. Why not let him be Gung Ho, man? Like, give us some of these characters that we really like. Everybody loves the guy that flew the helicopter that wore the cowboy hat, you know, kind of a straight rip from Robert Duvall's character in Apocalypse Now. Like, there's so many good characters to choose from, and instead of Lady J, they're giving us Cover Girl. You know, Snake Eyes, at least they got that right, because people that are into the characters, you know, they're going to like Quick Kick, they're going to like Shipwreck, they're going to like Gung Ho. But if you're into the narrative heart of the comics, well, the narrative heart of the comics is all Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow's story. So at least they brought in Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, and then also give them identifiable costumes. I mean, we first meet the Joe team and they're all dressed in identical black bodysuits, and then it just becomes super boring.
Hanging out in some secret place, like they're all,
and then the magic dynamic that works with Cobra is, first off, you know, you give them all kinds of crazy mercenaries, that's fine, but the secret dynamic that works with Cobra is the fact that Destro and Cobra Commander really kind of hate each other, but they're working for a common goal. Destro is lawful evil, Cobra Commander's chaotic evil, and they sort of show the secret of the dynamic that even if you're evil, with a lawful evil guy that plays by a certain set of rules, even if they're not society's rules, is always going to lose out to the guy who's willing to do anything to win. And that's why he's like bitter that he's under Cobra Commander's foot, but he's under Cobra Commander's foot because the guy who's willing to lie is always going to win arguments with the guy who always tells the truth. And then his code of honor keeps him in his role. And it's always really interesting. That's what even led to Serpentor being a thing, because Destro needed a new commander. They totally missed that whole thing. And then once again, I'm going to go back to saying, with a property like this, I should know who the character is as soon as they come on screen. Like, the only one that really has two of them have a great intro. Baroness, as soon as she shows up, you know it's Baroness with the black hair and the glasses. And then there's no missing Snake Eyes when he rappels out of that helicopter head first. So they should have handled all of them, where like they needed Shipwreck with his sailor hat. They needed the guys that you know who they are as soon as you look at them.
I also, you know, one of the cool things about Cobra is that, you have Destro and Cobra Commander who are always at each other's throats, but then you have like their lieutenants underneath them that are just as interesting and just as crazy. Yeah. And, you know, one of my favorite guys of those lieutenants is Major Blood. I always love Major Blood.
He is a good one.
Like, we should see a whole lot more Major Blood, Dr. Mindbender, Zartan to a lesser extent, Tomax and Zaymot. Like, these are very interesting characters, and they're not making them interesting at all.
Are you trying to tell me that Arnold Vosloo is not interesting? How dare you?
Look, I love Arnold Vosloo just as much as everyone else. However, he does not strike me as Zartan, you know?
And Zartan has a very distinct look. Once again, you don't have to be exactly cartoon or comic book accurate, but you got to do enough there so that as soon as I see him, I go, oh, that's Zartan.
Right.
Where are the dreadnoughts? How do you bring in Zartan without the dreadnoughts? Because they're the fun part of Zartan. Mm-hmm. It's not him. It's the idiots that work under him.
Right.
And you know, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, before he becomes Cobra Commander, but when he's no longer Rex, when he's got the breathing apparatus and the like monocle over one eye, that is who should have been Dr. Mindbender.
Agreed.
Now, it doesn't have to be Levitt. If you really want Levitt as Cobra Commander, that's fine. But then when you see who actually is Dr. Mindbender, it's pretty clear that like he's just a random scientist, and somebody goes, oh, here's this character. We can give him a name that's in universe, because nothing about him says Mindbender.
It's very Goyer feeling, this movie.
Oh, yeah. We took a
Oh,
lot of the
yeah.
names that we realized off the back of toy boxes and go, that's a character everybody loves. Put them in.
Another thing this movie has going against it is that it is special effects, even for the time, are just awful.
Well,
The sets are awful. What it feels like to me is that Roy Scheider show from the 90s.
Sequest?
Sequest DSV.
Yeah.
That's what this movie feels like.
Yeah, there is something about this movie that is, when you're looking at it, you're like, this movie costs so much money, but is also at the exact same time made so cheaply.
And the sets, you can see it through the sets. I mean, it looks like a college production of Les Miserables.
Yeah, the sets are super cheap. Like if you're in a room with like a whole bunch of computer monitors and stuff, it looks like it's absolutely terrible. This movie has so much green screen in it. It's unbelievable because none of that base is real. It's just, there's so much stuff. But then there's some things that go, oh, that looks pretty cool. A couple of the big set pieces kind of look neat and have some fun to them. But it's very incongruent throughout the entire movie. The quality just shifts from like student level film stuff all the way up to like, whoa, look at that. Hollywood threw some money behind this one. And literally the next following scene will look like it was filmed with a soup can.
Yeah, kind of disappointing there, man. And Brendan Fraser, a guy that I always like. I don't know why I always like that guy. I think I would have liked him as Hawk instead of this sort of forgettable Sergeant Stone.
Well, the reason why you like Brandon Fraser is because there's a legitimacy to him as an actor.
Yeah.
That is sorely missing from just about everyone else, from Dennis Quaid all the way to the Baroness. And I will say this right now. I have a Baroness problem. That is well documented. That is my type of lady. And Sienna Miller looks amazing, but she is the wrong person for this movie.
Especially if you have affection for like the cartoon or comic book version of Baroness, where she's got that vague Eastern European accent. You know,
bringing Sienna Miller to play Baroness, who should be such a total awesome character, or even it doesn't even need to be characterization. That would have worked for this movie too. But hiring Sienna Miller, it's like hiring Mandy Moore to play Cersei Lannister or something. Like it's just the wrong role. It's the wrong role. It's like bringing like Mila Kunis as the Wicked Witch.
Now, also, I know that you don't like it when a movie small worlds the story.
I hate it.
Yeah, and they not only do they small world the story for this movie, but it's not like even the comics didn't small world it this much. Like Baroness was actually a baroness in her own right. Anastasia de Cobra, great last name, from some vague Eastern European country.
De Cobra,
who is a baroness. She's not. She's not the sister of Cobra Commander. Cobra Commander's classic backstory is that he's a used car salesman from Springfield, Illinois, which is just kind of awesome. It's like this guy is like such a 80s stereotype of a loser, like John Candy should be playing him in a movie kind of thing. And then somehow he becomes this center focal point of evil around the globe. Like there's something just so much fun about that. He goes from down on his luck. He's not even a good used car salesman in Springfield, Illinois. And somehow he manages to make his way. Like, how in the world does this happen? That keeps you interested, wanting to know more, instead of, oh, she's the brother of the guy that Duke was going to marry, and Duke's best friend is also the small worlding stuff is not something that Hama did outside of the whole Snake Eyes Storm Shadow situation, where it's not like in the way that Hama tells the story, it's not like coincidence that they end up on opposite sides of each other. It's like it's a result of what happened, and it's not just small world coincidence like these movies do all too often.
So did this movie pass the phone test for you guys?
Oh, not even remotely.
I could not get away from my phone.
I tried to concentrate so hard. This movie even has like a really crummy sound mix. I was like, well, maybe.
no.
I'm like, maybe.
And it's a Silvestri score.
Well, yeah. Well, it's the most. Well, he's done with Silvestri a whole bunch, and it's the weakest Silvestri score ever. It feels, honest to God, all of the music in this movie feels like temp track. This is temp track that they would just throw in until they're like, listen, we're going to do something like this, but we'll figure out what the real thing will be later. But they never did.
There's a whole, like, if you want to read about it, man, there's a whole online, I don't want to call it a conspiracy. It's just a debate about the fact that the studio messed up the master and they just won't own it up. Like, if you do the analysis, you can see where it clips and the frequencies that were cut off, and it's very clearly that they messed up the transfer from the master, or maybe messed up the master, that this is an incompetently recorded version of a competent soundtrack, but they just won't own it.
It's not out of the realm of impossibility. But no, I'd never heard that, but interesting nevertheless.
Yeah.
Well, they've messed everything else up in this movie. Why not the sound also? I mean, think about like what an easy layup it is to have the Cobra troops look accurate to what we know as Cobra troops. That's iconic. It's even easy, but like everybody can cosplay as that. But they even screw that part up. Like, what are you doing?
And, you know, some of the most iconic stuff they mess up in weird ways. I mean, the Cobra Commander helmet, man, they just totally blew that. It doesn't even bear any talking because they just blew it so badly that there's not anything to say other than they blew it. But even with Storm Shadow, he had such that figure was probably a lot of people's favorite figure just because he had this awesome appearance where it's like just your standard white ninja suit with the sleeves cut off and a big Cobra emblem emblazoned over his breast. I mean, that's hard to mess that up. And it's like they messed it up by trying to improve it. It's one of those situations like they added this tail floating on the back, like he's wearing a jacket over it. Also, I think they have a little too much Storm Shadow out of the ninja suit for my luck or for my taste, but that's like an easy thing to reproduce. And it's one of those rare things where a comic book accurate depiction doesn't look ridiculous on screen. It actually looks great.
Right. And, you know, but they screw up everything. Like, you know, Snake Eyes looks like a Power Ranger.
Why does he have lips?
It's so
Why does
bad.
Snake Eyes have lips? No version of Snake Eyes has ever had lips in his mask that I'm aware of until this one.
Well, especially since he doesn't talk. What's the point?
So dumb.
Does it even is there a place for a straw to go through if he needs a little sippy sip on something? What's going on? It doesn't make any sense. Did they at least fix that in the sequel? I don't remember.
Oh, I sure hope they did, man.
It's
and you know,
it's not
there's
good.
still the alleged Snake Eyes standalone movie that got pushed back due to COVID that's supposed to be coming out any day.
I feels like they've been saying that for almost a decade at this point, and I'll believe it when I see it.
I've got another pitch for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got another pitch for a different movie, and this feels like it's a Bruce Leslie fastball, but you know, I think everyone can admit to the best part of this movie by far is the Duke and Baroness relationship, right? I mean, everybody loves it. No, I'm kidding.
I was about to say, what movie are you watching?
The best part of this movie is Lil Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow Jr.
It's
the best part of this
most
movie.
interesting point of the entire film. This little stupid
that is the most
flashbacks.
interesting part of this movie. So you make the movie basically Lil Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow Jr.
I want to call it Little Snake Eyes. I just want that to be the title.
And that is your movie, right? You go through the years, like Storm Shadow kills their master for reasons I don't fully understand because he wasn't.
Well, you would understand if you were familiar with the comics or had you seen the sequel to this.
Well, I have seen the sequel to this, but I watched it very, very drunk in a bar with Carlos Valencia.
That sounds about right.
Do you think people mind if I tell why Storm Shadow killed Hardmaster?
Let's have it.
Storm Shadow didn't kill Hardmaster. Everybody just thinks Storm Shadow killed him. Now, I won't say who did it because I want to give you some reason to watch the sequel, but I will say that what you're describing, Sean, is probably what wrapped filming on February 26th of 2020. Filming wrapped in February on the Snake Eyes movie.
Really?
With Henry Golding as Snake Eyes. I like Henry
I
Golding.
like him too. He's good.
And Samara Weaving? She's Scarlet.
Samurai Weaving.
Yes, Samurai Weaving. But and of course that's good because anybody who's a comic book fan knows that Scarlet is not Ripcord's lady. Scarlet is Snake Eyes' lady.
Yeah.
Right. And also on top of that, so since we're talking about Little Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow Jr., Master turns to Storm Shadow and calls him Storm Shadow. So as a small child, his name is Storm Shadow?
Yeah, and the other guy got to nickname himself Snake Eyes. What kind of world are we living in?
Storm Shadow's last name is like, oh boy, me trying to say Japanese names.
Uh-oh.
Let me try to get it right, but it's actually the Japanese translation of Storm Shadow.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's Arashikage, maybe?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Arashikage means shadow of the storm or storm shadow. So when you see Hardmaster calling him Storm Shadow, he's calling him Arashikage, and then they're translating it to Storm
It's
Shadow.
like him just going, Johnson, get your crap together.
For some reason, his first name is Thomas. So go with that. I don't know how poor Thomas Storm Shadow found his way to Hardmaster.
Listen, if he wants to get a job.
Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
I was going to say, if he wants to get a job in America, he's got to have that American name.
Are they going to keep the best line in the movie from G.I. Joe? Because Storm Shadow's in it. And Storm Shadow Jr. has the best line in this movie where the Master says to him, like, hey, we're supposed to help people. And then Storm Shadow Jr. turns to Master and says, he's a cur, a weakling. He's a cur.
Keep that in. Yeah. You don't hear people called a cur often enough these days.
Brilliant.
Let's talk about another bad thing. I can't believe we haven't really touched on him too awful much. And I like him as an actor, but what he's doing in this, I could not tell you. What in the world is Christopher Eccleston doing in this film?
Now
receiving paychecks.
A big paycheck. I feel like I'll be in your movie, but I get to do whatever voice I want to do. And he's like, all right, fair.
He's another person who famously hates that he hated this movie, hated everything about it. But strangely, he voluntarily did it. Like, he was not a Channing Tatum situation where he had no choice. But he's one of those weird guys. He's almost, in my opinion, Chris Eccleston, almost a little bit in Hugo Weaving territory where he seems to hate everything he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see. But he's also...
I mean, he hated being the Doctor. I don't know. Maybe he loved that Thor Dark World. I don't know. And then he hated this. And what's he loved? What's Eccleston loved?
Probably like his real early stuff. That
Shallow
he did.
Grave.
Yeah, some Shallow Grave kind of like that's
He's
the
great
level
in
he
that,
wants
too.
people.
He's
Yeah,
great in
it's
Shallow
good
Grave.
stuff. But that's where he wants people to, kind of go
Yeah.
towards, as opposed to like his awful accent here in this movie that the whole time you're just going, why? You were a British man with a fantastic British voice. Head at it, my man. No one's going to, we're all going to praise
We've got
you for
nothing
it.
else right, but we want to make sure that Destro is from Scotland, like in everything else.
Why? And it's not even like it's like a lovely that kind of
No.
Scottish accent that kind of comes through a little bit, and you're like, ooh, that's kind of sexy. Just that like oh, you're from another land kind of thing. It's that horrible Scrooge McDuck that you're like, Jesus, what are we doing here?
Man, David Tennant would have been David Tennant would have been better
he
than
would, but
Eccleston.
he would've
Again,
been great.
he knows how
The
to control
Scrooge
his
McDuck.
actual accent. That's the big difference.
Yeah.
But also canonically, Destro's name is Laird James McMullen Destro the 24th. Like, the last name is Destro. So I don't know why they had to make it like a nickname.
It's bizarre, but really,
Well, why is the president of the United States a British man?
oh, I was going to get to that eventually, but yes, Jonathan Pryce is the president, and you're like, what is going on here?
We elected the Pope president?
It's just bizarre, and I love Jonathan Pryce. I don't know what he's doing in this film. It's
Man.
so weird.
Man.
But the person who I think probably, outside of Brendan Fraser, who is clearly there because his buddy is directing this movie, and you're like, hey, you haven't been anything in 8 years. How about you pop on into this flick? And he's like, all right, sure, why not? I'll do some weird-ass voice, and, the people will love it, apparently. But Dennis Quaid is absolutely awful in this movie. He is the worst.
You know what I thought about while watching his performance in this movie? I believe that I have given Dennis Quaid a pass for basically 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because the only thing I can remember that he's actually honest to God great in is The Rookie.
Did you see Everybody's All-American?
Yes.
I thought he was good in that, but I was
He
also
is good
pretty
in that
young.
too.
I was pretty young when I watched it.
Maybe he's just sports guy, movie guy.
Well,
could be.
He's fun in Inner Space, but only because he's playing an a-hole.
Yes.
And I think, like, if every movie he was ever in was some version of that Space Cowboys movie, I could see him as being a good space cowboy.
He is just so bad. His lines are
but
so
I
ham-handed.
can't remember him being good in anything.
Well, do you know who is to blame for Dennis Quaid being General Hawk?
Oh, no.
Bruce Willis.
Jack Quaid. Jack Quaid was a huge G.I. Joe fan as a kid.
There you go.
So his dad had to take the role. He did it for Jack.
Man, oh, man. 102 credits Dennis Quaid has, and I think you're right. There's maybe half a dozen in there where you're like, that's really good. There's so much of his career that is just, and especially the last 20 years, have just been pretty awful.
You know where I think he was a perfect fit? A movie that Dennis Quaid was a perfect fit for?
What's that?
The role he had in Film 43. That seemed pretty much spot on.
I'd never seen it, but I just because I know well enough to stay away from something that even the people involved go, we were had. That's when you know it's bad, when they were just like, listen, there's a lot of successful directors in here that somehow or another were bamboozled into doing a movie that they had no idea what it was, what they were doing in it, but somehow they couldn't get out of it.
It all started somehow he blackmailed Hugh Jackman into filming a scene with testicles on his chin, and then he told people, Jackman is in this. You want to be in it.
Yeah, I don't understand it, but Dennis Quaid's career is baffling to me, and the fact that he's still kind of getting work today is also like, he's not doing anything interesting, unique, or different.
But you have to admit, he's probably secured his role as the least weird brother.
Well, I mean, notwithstanding, yeah, fair enough. When you got Crazy Eddie as your brother here in both screen and real life, it's sure you're going to look like a 3 compared to that 9.
What'd you guys think about the nanotes? In 2009, were nanomites, nanobots, whatever they call them, were those as overdone in 2009 as they seem now?
I don't think so, but that is actually one of the elements to this, while maybe not executed perfectly, is at least an interesting enough of an idea. I like the visual behind it and everything, that this kind of green mist that we all know is these tiny little robots. I love how, you shoot something and it just eats away at it completely. I thought it was like a really neat, interesting sci-fi idea to put into this. And for the most part, you can tell that that's where a lot of the money went, is the big France scene and all that, the giant chase. That's where you can tell a lot of the money was spent.
Yeah.
But it's a neat enough idea, and I like that they gave it a good out of like, oh, if you just kind of press the kill switch here, that'll go and kill all of them. I'm like, good. That's all I need is some dumb little explanation that just goes, flick this button, they all stop, and there's Bob's your uncle. We're good to go. I'm like, okay, good, fair.
I went away for a second. Have you guys talked about the power suits?
No. First, I want to say that's not a G.I. Joe thing at all. That's like very un-G.I. Joe. So that bugged me from moment one.
It's one thing. This watch, I actually like the power suits more this time than I did on the previous watches. I don't know why, but for some reason, maybe just because it was like, oh, look, some halfway decent action, so we don't have to hear them talking and trying to pretend to be characters, so we can at least enjoy some action. I think that's maybe why I liked it a little bit more this time. It's not a horrible idea, but it's not a great one.
The power suits are a fine idea. It's just not a G.I. Joe idea, like Bruce says.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's a G.I. Joe movie, lose the power suits and come up with some ridiculous scenario where what they need is a bridge so they can call in the famous G.I. Joe bridge layer to lay a bridge. Right. That would have been way more fun for me.
Well, you think the bridge layer ever gets offers to do other stuff other than bridges, and he's just like, excuse me, do you know who you called? It's bridge layer. Get out of here with that.
Could you give us a ramp? Look, buddy, I'm not a ramp layer. I'm a bridge layer.
Yeah, you got to get my cousin ramp layer to
we got to get tripwire in here.
Bridge Layer was the first G.I. Joe vehicle I ever had, so it's my favorite by default in some way.
Not like there's always going to be a contingency of people who want Bridge Layer to be in a G.I. Joe movie, but alas, here we are in 2020.
What I'm really holding out for is that Snake Eyes movie that is totally real and wrapped up filming February 26, 2020.
Likely. Don't believe it.
I want that to do for G.I. Joe what Bumblebee did for me with Transformers.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that would be amazing if they kind of almost retconned this whole thing and made it neat and cool. Wow, that'd be a fantastic
Made it
feat.
similar enough to the toys and cartoons and comics that people love that you can recognize. You know, the first Transformers movies, my biggest complaint was I didn't know which Transformer it was until somebody said their name. But if you give us a good Snake Eyes, and then you build off the vibe that was in that Bumblebee Transformers movie, then what like nerds in 1986 were dying for can finally happen, which is that Transformers G.I. Joe crossover live action movie.
It should have started off smaller with a Snake Eyes movie anyway. And I will say this about the Snake Eyes movie. If there's anyone involved in the making of that movie who actually gives a damn, we are way ahead of the game than what happened with G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, because nobody cares.
Yeah, like I said, they just shoehorned G.I. Joe characters into a script that was already out there.
It's a rough one. All right, before we get to our final review here and everything, we do have to ask ourselves one very important question, is how this movie relates one-to-one with Sylvester Stallone.
Thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement. Mm-hmm. He's very tall. He was born and raised in London, England, and he's been in everything. And his name is, here we go, Adewale Akinoye Kambaje.
Man, better than I would have done.
I saw him on an episode of The Wendy Williams Show so I could hear him pronounce his own name. And on that show, he said that he prefers to be called AAA. So that's what I'm going to call him here.
Nice.
AAA. In G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, he plays heavy duty. And if you're a middle-aged man-child like me, you've probably never heard of Heavy Duty because the character was created in 1991. And by then, I had moved on from G.I. Joe, and I was really into dark superheroes. Remember when Todd McFarlane made Spider-Man dark, and he was always on the verge of drowning? Because I do.
Yeah.
And I want to say it was great, but it wasn't. It wasn't great. Spider-Man was constantly almost drowning.
But it looked cool.
In 1991, AAA was modeling in Milan. He graduated with a master's degree in law from King's College. He speaks at least 4 different languages. He can kick your ass. He's been rich from money he made himself since he was 25, and AAA is living. His first screen credit is a Mary J. Blige video in 1993. From there, he never stops working. His first big movies are Congo, then Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. If there's one knock on AAA, it's that he has terrible representation. Because if there's a terrible movie or a terrible TV show, he's in it. And I'm including G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra in that. For every appearance on Lost, he's got 2 guest spots on shows like Pensacola, Wings of Gold, and Red Shoe Diaries. Yeah, he might have been in The Bourne Identity, but he's also in Legionnaire starring Van Damme. And he's also in G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, which is also a terrible movie. And the day he should have realized he needed new representation was February 1st, 2013, because that's the day Bullet to the Head was released. What's it about, you ask? Why, it's about a hitman and a cop teaming up to take down a guy. And it stars Stallone, Jason Momoa, Christian Slater, and was directed Walter frickin' Hill. Look him up. AAA has had the kind of life that most people dream about, and I'm including the fact that he worked on the 2011 remake of The Thing because that movie is awful, but at least he was in it. So there you have it, sweet Kovaxers. This week's Stallone Connection is AAA. Adam and Bruce, this is the 325th episode of this bit. Still no word from Sylvester Stallone.
Nah, one day. I didn't realize where I knew him from. He was Mr. Echo in Lost. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, he was also Killer Croc
Oh, yeah.
in the Suicide Squad.
Well, we try to forget that movie. We're really hoping that new one's going to be good and maybe kind of be a reclamation for the Suicide Squad. But that's in due
Hopefully
time.
it's just one and out, too.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Alrighty, now it's time to get down to our own patented Robin rating system. If you'd like to check that out, head on over to our subreddit /Here Movie Podcast. Check it out. Bruce, where does G.I. Joe Rise of the Cobra fall on the Robin rating system for you?
Despite the fact we spent a lot of time talking about what was wrong with it, it wasn't as bad as I remembered, but I remembered it being pretty bad. And then you got to look at like these Hasbro properties and think it could have been Jim and the Holograms. I think it's better than Jim and the Holograms. So if that is your bar, like if you say I won't watch a movie unless it's better than Jim and the Holograms, this one's probably okay to watch. For me, it was kind of like when you spend way too much time drinking in the beginning, it's actually kind of fun. You're like, oh yeah, this is alcohol. This kind of makes you feel good. Then a little bit later on, you don't really know what's going on, but you remember it felt good at first. So you keep drinking. By the end, you have no clue where you are, what your circumstances are, and you really just want to pass out. That's what watching this movie felt like to me the first two times. This third time, it was palatable. So I'm actually going to say if for some reason you're a G.I. Joe fan, you haven't watched this yet, and you think you've heard it's horrible, go ahead and watch it because it's not as horrible as maybe it could have been, but it's still like low Damian Wayne. I'm not going to give it a Stephanie Brown. I'm going to give it a low Damian Wayne because at least you can have fun complaining about it.
Yeah, fair enough. Sean?
If you like seeing Brandon Fraser's last in shape performance, this is it.
And even then, it's not like he ain't in mummy shape though. He's still got a little bit on him.
Like a movie where bad guys infiltrate G.I. Joe's base and know how to use the defense system better than G.I. Joe does, this is the movie for you. If you like movies with like Man of Steel level of collateral damage, this is your movie, because literally just so many bystanders are dead in this movie.
Oh, so many people.
This is
get
the movie
killed.
for you.
Yeah, that's what I was surprised about. Was like how many like just straight murders we saw in this thing that was ultimately designed for children. It's like, hey, that guy got a forklift rammed through his chest. Okay, well, I guess we're just moving on. What a weird one. I think I'm a lot with Bruce in this. I think I liked it a little bit more this time than I did last time, but that's not saying anything. If you would have asked me before we reviewed this, I think I would have absolutely said this was a Jason Todd. But I'm gonna go straight up Stephanie Brown on this. It's forgettable. There's so much to it that is really, really bad. But there are a couple of neat ideas and stuff, and I would only put this in the hands of somebody who was, I don't even want to say a really hardcore G.I. Joe fan, somebody who like is kind of like me and has a passing enough knowledge of G.I. Joe,
right,
but is not going to get mired down in the like, hey, where's this character kind of thing, because you ain't going to get that. This is not that movie for you. Maybe this new Snake Eyes thing will be the reclamation project that this outfit so desperately needs. But right now, I'm just going to go Stephanie Brown. It's very, very forgettable. I don't know that I'm going to go back for the fourth.
You didn't let me finish.
I'm so sorry. Your internet's not so great, and I was trying to like.
I don't think it's my internet that's the problem.
All right,
I heard every word. I heard every word you were saying.
All right, fair. I am sorry. You finish. I was so concerned. I'm just like, oh man, oh god. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
Okay. So here is the key to it. I watched this on Thursday. I forgot everything about this movie already, except I had notes.
That's good.
I've seen this movie once before. I couldn't remember anything about it except for Joseph Gordon-Levitt being super weird and kind of cool that he's being that weird in this movie. This is a Stephanie Brown. This movie is the worst. Stephanie Brown.
Alrighty. Well, I've already did mine because I'm an interrupting jerk who has the worst
no, his
internet
internet is
connection
gone.
right now. But see, they can't even hear me. But you can hear me quite well because I'm recording on this.
I might be the only one who can appreciate your ranking there, Sean.
No,
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you.
I heard it.
I have the good internet.
All right.
You have the good internet.
Well,
Bruce.
guess what's happening, everybody? I'm turning them down so I can finish this show. That is it. We are going to be doing some more things later on. I'm not going to even bother with the traditional thing. All the links and everything are in the show notes, so go check them out. We're not 100% sure what we're going to be watching next week, but if we have enough of a connection, you'll hear it during the Dinger Zone, the post show right after this. You can do all that by heading on over to patreon.com/HMP. There you can help me possibly get some new internet. Who's to say? That is it for this week. See you next week. For Sweet Chunks of Kovacs from the internet, Bruce Leslie, I'm Anna Portress. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Evie.
Hey, Joe.